Season 3 of The House of the Dragon is gaining momentum. It seemed as though both the audience and the kind-hearted Rhaenyra were finally ready for the main course, the reign of the great queen herself. Instead, that long-awaited feast has been postponed because ruling a kingdom turns out to be far less glamorous than winning one. Old problems refuse to disappear, new ones emerge almost immediately. Fortunately, the new Queen of King's Landing is surrounded by allies who have stood beside her through years of war and hardship. If she can keep those relationships intact, perhaps she will survive not only an empty treasury, but even the rat infestation consuming the capital. But where exactly does Queen Rhaenyra make her biggest mistake? Is her younger brother really her greatest problem? Let's return to the Red Castle to find out. Just don't grab your fork and knife yet, and for now, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. The royal banquet may not be as satisfying as everyone expected. People say the food at the royal table has become rather disappointing lately. As always, let's begin with the opening position of the episode because it's absolutely essential to understanding everything that follows. Ironically, the Black's tactical victories, the Battle of the Gullet, and the capture of the King's Landing have left them in their most vulnerable strategic position yet. By taking the capital, Rhaenyra also inherits responsibility for a starving city whose economy has already collapsed. At the same time, her legitimacy is increasingly questioned because of the extraordinary brutality of the war and her growing reliance on dragon riders she cannot fully control. Meanwhile, the Greens have accomplished something surprisingly effective. Despite losing their central command, despite the execution of key leaders, and despite members of the royal family being captured, they have successfully decentralized their resistance. Aegon II remains alive somewhere in the east. Aemon, gravely wounded but still dangerously unpredictable, is opening in the Riverlands. And Ormond Hightower is advancing from the south with a fresh army. As a result, the Blacks are forced to stretch their forces across multiple fronts. The nature of war has changed. Holding King's Landing no longer guarantees victory. In fact, every time another dragon enters the battlefield, Westeros moves one step closer to economic collapse and social chaos. Even if peace arrives tomorrow, ashes as ruins would haunt the realm for generations. And peace is still nowhere in sight. The episode opens with another apparent victory for the Blacks. The Thousand Threat seems to have been neutralized. But if you lose track of your brothers and nephews, unexpected complications have a habit of appearing. Prince Daemon and his dragon Tessarion remain one of the greatest threats facing Rhaenyra. That's exactly why Daemon is so pleased when a silver-haired young man is brought into custody. Interestingly, the episode never actually confirms whether this captive is truly Daeron. We are left guessing, but regardless of his identity, Rhaenyra feels confident, victorious. She prepares herself for the formal responsibilities of ruling the kingdom. Unfortunately, reality arrives much faster than expected. Until recently, the greatest financial support for Rhaenyra's cause came from the wealthiest man in Westeros, Corlys Velaryon. However, the show's version of the Battle of the Gullet leaves the sea snake virtually bankrupt after his treasury is destroyed. On top of that, maintaining the entire royal court inside King's Landing requires vastly more resources than ruling from Dragonstone ever did. Normally, the royal treasury could have covered those expenses. By the time Rhaenyra arrives, the treasury is completely empty. In Fire and Blood, Aegon and Tywin Lannister secretly remove the crown's wealth before abandoning the city. In the television adaptation, however, it appears that Larry Strong quietly appropriated those funds for his own purposes. What's particularly amusing is that the Greens barely seemed concerned about the missing money in previous episodes. Apparently, feeding fish was a much higher priority than feeding starving citizens. Nearly the entire episode is told from Rhaenyra's perspective, allowing us to watch her psychological state gradually deteriorate. Her emotions swing wildly. She sees rats, she experiences hallucinations. At times, the show almost suggests she is becoming physically ill. And honestly, it's difficult to blame her. Only days ago, she lost her eldest son. Then she personally executes Otto Hightower. This episode is built around a series of conversations with different characters. Through each interaction, we watch Rhaenyra struggle. She fails to build trust with new allies and slowly damages many of her old relationships as well. Victories are won on the battlefield, but defeats, they usually begin much earlier inside cold palace walls. Because the capture of King's Landing can easily be described as a decisive military victory of the war, many of the people who made that victory possible, the very people whose support will determine whether Rhaenyra's reign remains stable, begin asking for the promises they believe they've earned. Alicent, still reeling from everything that happened in the throne room, reminds Rhaenyra of their agreement. She asks for permission to leave King's Landing with her daughter. Rhaenyra hesitates. She isn't ready for answer. And honestly, her hesitation is understandable. If she simply lets Alicent walk away, she may later regret it more than she can imagine. Still, this is the first clear promise Rhaenyra fails to keep. Then comes Hugh. His request is remarkably modest. He doesn't ask to become a great lord, he doesn't demand castles or titles. He simply wants permission to bring his wife back to the King's Landing and settle there with her. That's all. Yet instead of resolving such a simple request immediately, Rhaenyra tells him to wait, to stand in line like everyone else. Considering that Hugh now commands one of the largest dragons alive, smaller than Hagar, certainly, but still an overwhelming military asset, this feels like an astonishingly poor political decision. Especially since Hugh could easily have flown out and brought his wife back himself. Ulf, on the other hand, is a completely different story. His ambitions have always been obvious. Even during the attempted ambush against Daemon, he showed very little respect for kinghood or traditional honor. So, during the ceremony, he is clearly expecting something much greater. The only reason he restrains himself at all is because Daemon is standing nearby. Daemon is still the one person Ulf genuinely fears. But even so, it's obvious that he isn't satisfied. He wanted a lordship, he wanted recognition, and more importantly, he's exactly the kind of man who never knows when to stop wanting more. One detail may have fueled more ambitions even further. Earlier, during Daemon's negotiations with Ormond Hightower, Daemon openly suggested that one of the Dragonseeds could eventually become Lord of Old Town. Hugh heard that, so naturally Ulf begins wondering, if he can become a lord, why can't I? Then we arrive at Corlys Velaryon's request. His newly reunited family, Alan and Adam, played a crucial role in helping Rhaenyra seize the Iron Throne. So his request feels perfectly reasonable. He asks the queen to legitimize his sons. But the situation is more complicated than it first appears. Rhaenyra still has another child who is at least officially a Velaryon, Joffrey, recognized by Lenor as his son, named after the closest friend of Corlys' own son. Legally, Joffrey remains the heir to Driftmark. In reality, almost everyone understands that he will probably never inherit the island. Rhaenyra knows it. Her advisors knows it. Corlys almost certainly knows it too, yet the queen still refuses to act. She hesitates again. Her doubts don't seem especially rational, which makes Corlys' frustration completely understandable. The knighting ceremony itself is filled with ambiguity. Perhaps Rhaenyra doesn't refuse to name Adam a Velaryon because she's firmly opposed to it. Perhaps the teaming is simply terrible. After all, Ulf has just made outrageous request. He wants to become a Targaryen. Obviously, Rhaenyra cannot grant him that. But at the same time, she also can't publicly elevate Corlys' son while denying another Dragonseed standing in the very same room, even if that's her reasoning. The damage is already done. Tension begins spreading through the room, and Ulf's complaints begin sounding dangerously close to outright threats. That's what makes Corlys' disappointment particularly painful. When Rhaenyra needed support most, Corlys stood beside her. He accepted her children as legitimate. After Lynyr's death, he publicly recognized Lucerys as a future Lord of Driftmark. He supported Rhaenyra through every major crisis. His granddaughters fought for her. His sons risked their lives for her during the Battle of the Gullet. And now, after everything he has sacrificed, after everything his family has sacrificed, his own daughter-in-law refuses his request. From Corlys' perspective, it feels like betrayal. Rhaenyra later tries to justify her decision by talking about legitimacy and political complications, but emotionally, those arguments no longer carry much weight. His anger is completely understandable. By the end of these conversations, almost everyone who helped Rhaenyra reach the throne leaves disappointed. Corlys, his sons, the Dragonseeds, Alicent, one after another, the very foundations of her own reign began to crack. Not because she has lost another battle, but because she cannot make the right political decision at the right time. But Rhaenyra's troubles don't end with her closest allies. She is already beginning to lose the trust of her newest subjects as well. One of the first warning signs comes from the High Sept. He refuses to bless Rhaenyra's coronation because, in his eyes, Prince Aegon's claim still carries religious legitimacy. The meaning of the sin is fairly straightforward, although I can't help thinking of one rather amusing solution. Honestly, Rhaenyra could have appointed Ulf as the new High Septon. Religious leaders in George Martin's world often possesses no more moral integrity than an ambitious Dragonseed. And at the very least, we would have been treated to another one of Prince Daemon's wonderfully sarcastic smiles. The grand banquet and the distribution of bread to the starving people certainly create an impressive spectacle. For a brief moment, it looks like Rhaenyra is winning the hearts of the small folks. The problem is that the effect is only temporary. The positive ones, at least. Confiscating food and wealth from the nobility will create resentment that lasts for longer than gratitude of those receiving free bread. Daemon immediately recognizes how ineffective this strategy really is. He is surprisingly unconcerned by the celebration itself, partly because he is focused on much bigger goals, but also because almost everything happening around him strikes him as strategically short-sighted. Then Rhaenyra makes another questionable decision. She sends Daemon to the Vale. Of all places, this is particularly ironic considering Daemon was previously driven out of the Vale because of the scandal surrounding his first wife. Yes, sending one of the Dragonseeds there would have been unwise, but someone like Baela could easily have represented the crown instead. Instead, Baela has fallen out of favor with Rhaenyra, and Daemon, the one person whose loyalty has never wavered after his return, is sent away from the capital, far away from the queen, far away from the center of power. He is the single most reliable pillar surrounding her reign, yet she removes him from the place where he could do the most good. And judging by the episode's final revelation involving the fake Daeron, it's entirely possible that in Rhaenyra's increasingly clouded state of mind, suspicion will eventually fall on Daemon as well. By the way, I'd actually love to make a separate video dedicated entirely to Daemon's long-term strategy. If there's something you'd like to say, let me know in the comment section. Now let's return to another fascinating introduction. During the royal banquet, we're introduced to Torhen Manderly, the Lord of White Harbor. He's the head of the wealthiest house in the north and controls one of the Westeros' most important ports. the Manderlys and loyal Stark bannermen, and historically, they've never had much affection for the rich. You may also have recognized the actor immediately. Yes, that's the same actor many viewers know from Fantastic Beasts. The show seems to be positioning Torrhen for a much larger political role than he had at his stage in the books. At the very least, he represents something Rhaenyra desperately needs right now. Money. And I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes one of the people helping stabilize her reign in the coming episodes. Finally, let's go back to the opening sequence of the episode. The writers once again make major changes to the storyline in the Reach, just as they previously simplified events in the Riverlands. They've removed several important rebellions led by houses loyal to the Black. Personally, I think there was enough material in both the Riverlands and the Reach to build an entire season around those campaigns. It would have given many secondary characters far more room to develop. And honestly, I think audiences would have enjoyed that approach. Instead, the sequence involving Ormond and the supposed Daeron feels more like a shortcut. A quick patch designed to move the story forward. I'll definitely make a separate video comparing the storyline with the version from Fire and Blood because the differences are substantial. One interesting detail though, the real Daeron has actually already appeared on screen. When Ormond first enters the story, a young man with chestnut hair wearing green briefly appeared in the background. That's the real Daeron. And yes, he will eventually take to the skies on his blue dragon, Tessarion. Meanwhile, Daemon once again proves himself clever and pragmatic. He tries to save lives for taking only a hostage instead of slaughtering everyone. But Ormond's trick with the fake prince turns out to be surprisingly ingenious. The real mystery now is simple. Where did this false Daeron even come from? I have a feeling that writers are settling up another interesting subplot. In Fire and Blood, characters like Gaemon Pelahar and Tristan Truefire eventually appear as rival claimants. Perhaps the show is borrowing ideas from those storylines. We'll have to wait and see. Overall, after 2 action-packed episodes, I expected the series to return to the slower, character-driven pacing that makes the first season so compelling. I just hope it doesn't stay there for too long. Personally, I really enjoyed the quieter approach. The performances are excellent, and the actor continued to carry those dialogue-heavy episodes beautifully. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if many viewers rate this episode lower than the previous 2. So I'm already preparing myself for some lively debates in the comment section. What did you think of episode 3? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time as we continue exploring the world of Westeros.